Alrighty, everybody. Welcome again to the regular weekly podcast where it's more ramblings that are not as directed as the time when Pastor Dave and I sit down and we talk about the secrets behind the text that we are preaching on. The sermon secrets. Hopefully people are enjoying those. We've done two so far, one on Acts 1 and another on Acts chapter 2. So we'll see how that goes. Now I know someone asked David, after watching the video of him and I, why there's a sign that says, "I was wrong." Now, I mentioned this sign when I started this series, and the story behind it is my older brother Daniel. He told me whenever I was, I don't know, about 13, I think around 13, we'll say 13, that I was not going to be taller than him, that he was going to be the tallest of the Murray boys. And that if I ever grew taller than him, he would make a sign saying I was wrong. And then, turns out I grew to be taller than him, and he kept his word, and he made the sign. And now, it's, I think, a great sign, but my wife doesn't think it's necessarily a great interior decoration to have, so to say. So it's hung in my office at a previous spot, and then now it hangs in my home office in Astoria. Now it hangs in my office here at work in Maumee. And I have it up as a basic reminder that, you know what, we will be wrong as people. And it's not fun admitting when we're wrong, but we frequently are. And we need to be able to admit when we are wrong. And so I have that up in my office reminding me, don't get too full of yourself. Don't make big, bold statements or whatever that you can't back up. And also, when you're wrong, admit when you're wrong. Now, usually I talk about running escapades whenever I talk about on my ramblings. And this week has not been a week of running escapades, though I did get one run in this week. I have been feeling subpar, so to say, and the weather has been kind of non-conducive to outside running. I have kept up my push-up streak that I wanted to start as a new year. Feeling pretty strong, really excited about that. But someone asked me last week how cold it had to be to not run outside. Now, whenever I was in high school, I remember a time that I put on a full snowsuit, and I went out and I ran around our block that we lived in, and it's a 3-mile block, and it was negative 10 degrees. Now, that was in the mid-2000s, so I don't know if the negative 10 included, if that was the real feel, or if that was just the actual, the forecast, that it was negative 10 degrees. And I remember in college, and running when it was decently cold, but only in college I would go play basketball if it was too cold. During seminary, whenever I was training, whenever I was running with some of the Cornerstone students, there was once or twice when we ran in a snowstorm, and that was really fun. And I probably moved it to be about 10 degrees. Now, I've moved it up to 20 degrees. As like, if it's a real feel 20, I'm not going out on a run. My throat just feels too ripped up and shredded if I've breathed deeply whenever it's that cold outside, like you do whenever you're running. So I mourn the fact that I can't go running out whenever it's that cold. I really have a lot of fond memories running with Zach Taylor and Andy Barris during high school, whenever there's snow out on the road. And then I remember one time I was running with Andy, and then we got back to his house, and his mom had made grilled cheese sandwiches with ham on them, and they were wonderful. And I have a fond recollection of that memory. But in the same vein as running, so here's an intersection of running and just sort of interesting stuff. So I remember hearing stories in high school and then at Moody about things that people would send to missionaries. And at Moody, there was something called the missionary barrel in the Dreyer dorm. For those of you who are super up to date, the Dreyer dormitory named after Emma Dreyer, was torn down a couple years ago. I'm very sad about that. But the bottom floor of the Dreyer dormitory was where the laundry and other stuff. It was a more common floor. There weren't rooms on the bottom floor, and in the room with all the washers and dryers, there was these barrels that if you wanted to just, not keep an article of clothing, you could put it in the quote missionary barrel. I don't know if these barrels ever actually got donated to missionaries, but what would usually happen is at the end of the semester, whenever people were, anytime someone was changing dorm room or had graduated and they're packing their stuff up, that missionary barrel would overflow. And I'm trying to think if I still have any articles of clothing from that missionary barrel, because what was also on every floor, at least on every floor that I've been on, but it's especially true on Dreyer 3, there was a table that was in like the common sitting area, the smaller common sitting area on the floor, and it was called the altar, and so you could like put your stuff on the altar for free for people to take. Obviously, the religious overtones of that were intended, but during that time, I remember hearing about people, the story about missionaries having received used tea bags because, well, it's better than what missionaries had. And for the people who aren't able to really pull themselves out of the 21st century mindset with being able to buy things online and the internet being available almost everywhere, and there was a lot of the globe that wasn't highly developed where if someone was there as a missionary, that they would be bereft of a lot of the modern niceties. And so missionaries were typically were donation based for their income, and so usually mission agencies didn't have very high salaries. So if you were a larger family that was a missionary for some mission agencies, depending on where you were, you didn't get a lot of nice stuff. And so even with that, people thought, well, I can give used tea bags because it's better than nothing for these missionaries. And I laughed at that, thinking that there's no way that could be something that people actually did or do. And so I was saving this story in case I was preaching over Acts 5 as a sermon illustration, but David's going to be preaching over Acts 5. Over Christmas, Mosaic Ministries was donated a lot of toys and a lot of other things for Christmas. Now, it's supposed to be just toys, and it's for a really neat shop that was set up. And the problem with donations, and anyone who's probably worked for Goodwill or Salvation Army or probably even Plato's Closet, like any place where stuff is donated, there's going to be weird stuff that's donated. But we were pretty good overall, and I was like, and I saw something and I picked it up, and it was a running belt that had a pocket for a phone and gels, and it had two small ergonomically shaped water bottles that were on the side and had a little rubber hook, not rubber hook, but like an elastic band that clipped over them, so that way it's easy to get them on and off, but also they were secure while running. And I'm like, you know what? The running belt that I have, it doesn't really fit the water bottles great that I have for it. And so I'm like, after all the donation time was up, I was like, there's just extra stuff laying all around. I took it. I was able to have it. And when it was just sitting in my office for probably a week and a half, 2 weeks, and then this week I finally ran with it. And whenever I pulled the water bottles out of the belt, both of them had this black, like, juice in them. And I was like, holy cow, someone donated a running belt with water bottles that they had ran in and didn't clean them but they thought, oh, I'm just giving this away, so it doesn't matter. Now, the reason why I was going to wait for Acts 5 to tell that story was when Ananias and Sapphira gave, they gave under the pretense of giving everything, and that giving with all that they had. And the frustration that Peter had was the fact that this giving was not wholehearted, and that they're actually lying about what they're giving. And so in Acts 5, Ananias and Sapphira, it didn't matter that they didn't give everything, it's that they were lying about what they gave. It doesn't matter that it was a used running belt, and that the water bottles were used, and that it's donated. No, it's that they weren't cleaned, and that there was this kind of this idea of like, well, oh, if anybody would take this. So like, I cleaned the water bottles, and I'm like filling them up with soap, hot water, squirting it out. I got a bottle brush, and I was, I scrubbed out the inside, and it's ironic that we had these concepts of generosity. When we give, do we have this idea that the person that we're giving to isn't necessarily worthy of receiving good things, and that they need to settle? Someone posted online this week, if you did not grow up privileged, what were some things that you thought were a luxury? Now, by most measures, I grew up in a very privileged home. Parents are college educated. It worked. I don't want to at all sound like I had a hard childhood. There were hardships, but I remember growing up, we might not have been, so to say, destitute or poor, but we were very thrifty with our money, or stingy on things that we purchased. There was not a lot of extra stuff. And I remember growing up thinking, like, if you went out to McDonald's, like, man, that was the essence of luxury. Or like, you had Nike shoes instead of and ones, or not and ones, like Shacks or whatever. Or if the only way you could ever have Nikes is if you bought them secondhand. Now that I'm 36 and I have 3 kids, there's just the practicality of like, yeah, my mom and dad weren't going to buy new shoes for us as we were in the middle of growing, and like, shoes didn't really last from one kid to the next because we were playing outside or we were playing hard, and you grow. And I can't tell you how. I mean, I might have inherited some soccer cleats because that was something that my parents were going to spend good money on to make sure that my brothers and I, when we were playing soccer, like, you can mess up your feet if you don't have cleats that fit you. So those got passed down a little bit because those were more enduring. But it's just ironic thinking about, money and finances now that I'm 36, looking back and thinking about things, hearing stories, and then actually like experiencing some of this stuff with the with different ministries. And so do I think the person shouldn't have donated the bottles? No. It's probably, in the long scheme of things, the fact that they were noticeably dirty caused me to be extra vigorous in how I made sure that it was hot, soapy water, and I rinsed multiple times and scrubbed with brushes, whatever. And for the people who are like grossed out that someone would use a secondhand thing, I don't know how to handle that even. But everyone has a chance to learn and grow as they are maturing. I really hope that in another 6 years or another 10 years that I will look back on what I did and go, that's obviously what someone in their 30s would do. And I would look back and go, it was time to grow. There's things that you look back and you go, man, you really would not be able to do that when you're older because you're not as young, energetic, or fit. Achilles yesterday. I didn't run yesterday, but like yesterday evening, my Achilles just started hurting, and it was hurting me this morning. I just think, how on earth did I jump 1,000 times a day whenever I was in junior high? Yeah, my 8th grade year, I went through this insane jump training where I was jumping, and I was calf raises, and I was lowering the rim to different heights to dunk, to like be reinforcing stuff, and it worked. But like, I'm thinking, I don't think I can jump 100 times today without hurting really bad tomorrow. All right. That's enough of the rambling. These things don't need to go super long anymore now that David and I are doing our weekly updates, and I hope everyone has a great time. And I really do miss a lot of folks. Feel free to comment. Feel free, if you're one of the people who still has my phone number, shoot me a text, send me an email. Would love to hear from people. Brittany and I and the girls are doing great here, Mommy. I'm loving loving things where we're at. Love watching my kids play sports and the opportunities they get here. They've had great coaches so far, and hopefully next time I see you folks, it will be after